It's Tupac's birthday. Tupac, my G.
Hey,
Joey Badass.
hey.
Welcome back to the Guillotine Geeks. Today in the office, we're joined by Dr. Sean Aspinall. Sean, thank you for coming on.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
So, how did you find out about combat sports and when did you decide to come into it as a nutritionist?
So I've been involved in combat sports since I was a kid. My family's a bit of a fighting family. Heavy BJJ MMA background. So my uncle got me into kickboxing when I was quite young. So I've been in and about the sport for a bit. And I used to fight in Muay Thai myself. So it all kind of stemmed from that. And obviously before we came on, we spoke about like all the mad stuff that we used to do when we were cutting
Yeah.
weight, or like everybody used to do back when you start off. And it all came from that, really. So me fighting, I just thought I was 2 weeks out from another fight and I tore my cruciate in my knee. Uh, you'll know this when you go with the beginners in the gym, sometimes it can get a bit messy. This beginner snapped my ACL. So I was out for a long time, but somebody stepped in to fight for me on 2 weeks' notice. And he did a crazy weight cut. He did a really, really bad weight cut. And he ended up in hospital on the day of the fight before he'd even fought. So at that point, I just finished doing my undergrad at uni in Liverpool. And I thought, there's got to be a way of doing this. There's got to be a proper way of doing this. Because my way of making weight, I used to work at Tesco at the time, right? So I used to go to Tesco. I used to get a rotisserie chicken, hot rotisserie chicken, and just used to work through that all day. And my coach told me that I needed to do 10 litres of water a day. So I was doing 10 litres of water and a rotisserie chicken every day. And I still now, knowing what I know, don't know I made weight, but still made weight fine. But was seeing that guy end up in hospital almost on my behalf, I was kind of like, there's probably something that we should do here. Or I should at least learn to do it so I can kind of help people do it a way that I didn't do it.
And did you find taking the nutrition and trying to apply it to combat sports, did you find it awkward at the start or did you kind of find your rhythm quite quickly with it?
You know what? I was lucky because Liverpool John Moores, where I went to uni, is like one of the world leaders now in combat sports research. But at the time, like I'm quite old now, so at the time, research in combat sports just didn't really exist. Like one of the best papers came out in 2011, and that was like one of the first proper ones as well. So you got to think like how old combat sports is. We've only really started dialing in thoughts on nutrition for like 14, 15 years maybe. So everybody, especially I work a lot in boxing now, like you go to see the boxing and all the old heads are still very much in the old school way of doing things. So even when I went to uni, there wasn't really a lot of nutrition knowledge around fighters, and it wasn't really something that people did. Like my original goal was to go and work in football and things like that. And coming back into combat sports was almost a bit of an accident in that I couldn't find a job in football. I got rejected from GB Taekwondo and ended up in Wales doing a PhD. And people just got wind that I knew a bit about nutrition. And then it just snowballed from there and became what it is now, really. So at the time, it just couldn't apply anything because I was still quite young, but also the knowledge just wasn't there. I mean, there's not a ton there now, but it's much better than it was.
Yeah. And you mentioned the boxing there too. Obviously, a lot of the time the boxers don't really cut as much weight. Do you
No,
find that's still the case, or is it starting to shift more to the MMA side?
I think it's a lot better in boxing. Um, I always laugh at boxers because I've got this massive weight cut to really, really low, so I'm really worried. And it's like 4 kilos. And then you go and see an MMA guy and they go, right, I've got this weight cut, I should be all right. And it's like 16 kilos. And I'm like, the mindset is so different. So boxing is far better. I think across the board, these boxers are cutting less weight, they're dehydrating less weight. I think it's a lot safer. You got to think in MMA, sometimes you can get hit once and the ref can stop it. But in boxing, you can go 12 rounds, hundreds and hundreds of blows to the head. And in that scenario, you can't really afford to be dehydrated. So it is a nice thing that not only do they have more weight categories to choose from, but the weight cuts aren't as big. I'm not saying that's the case for everybody because there are some bigger ones, but across the board, it seems a lot easier.
There's also quite a big discussion for a long time now about whether or not MMA needs more weight classes like boxing. Because that, like, you look at the jump between like 205 to 185,
Yeah.
like, that's a big jump. And I think boxing has two or three weight classes in between there. Like,
Oh, yeah. Well, the thing is, there's a big controversy at the moment because the amateur boxing, they've kind of separated that and they've gone more towards an MMA model. So now people are like, well, I'm in between. What do I do? I do think, I personally think, to pull the amount of weight cutting out of MMA, you need more weight divisions. The jumps are what you're talking 35, 45, 55. Like that's an enormous gap between, do you know what I mean? And I've been a big advocate for this online, but you've got one side of the fan base, and you'll know MMA fans can be a bit mental, right? But you've got one side of the fan base going, weight cutting stupid, fight at your own weight, which you know as a fighter you just can't do. It's just not a thing you can do. Um, and then you offer them, oh well, let's just add more weight categories. And they go, oh well, the divisions aren't going to be as exciting and thingy. And I'm like, well, where do you want to be? Like fighter safety for me is number one. Like the fighters at the end of the day still have to go home and be parents and whatever. Do you know what I mean? So I would love more weight divisions. I think more weight divisions would be great. And you'd probably get some super crossover fights, especially in the UFC anyway. I don't think we'll see it, but I think it probably manages the weight cut problem for sure.
well, you even just like one tried that hydration clause, and there's a lot of people who said that at first everyone was a bit tedious and a bit hesitant with it, and now you see in fighters like Nico Corella, for example,
Hmm.
came out and he said first kind of two cuts he was scared with it, and then when he figured out what it actually is, it's not all
No. I mean,
too
I've
effective.
had a lot of guys go over to Thailand for one championship to pass the hydration test. And in my own opinion, if it's anything, if it's slightly more dangerous, because you're giving these guys an enormous amount of water to kind of bypass the test before you then do the cut. But for example, if you come into the cut and you normally have 2 kilos to do, to pass the hydration test for one and the amount of water you've got to drink to do it, you're talking nearly 3 kilos. So in theory, you're cutting more weight. So I'm like, well, we're just making another hoop for fighters to jump through. They don't need it. Do you know what I mean? Give people safe practice of weight cutting. I can see the logic behind why. And to be honest, sometimes it does stop people from going to them extreme weight classes. Like I've got guys in the UK of 40 to 55 who'll go and fight at 60 kilos instead. And I'm like, great. But everybody's still cutting weight. When you go to the one championship hotel, it's sweatsuits from Tuesday for some of them. And I'm like, what are we doing? Do you know what I mean? The UFC model, I think, for me is the best. Give them all the provisions, all the education. You turn up at a UFC fight week and they give you everything you need to make weight. Most of the time you see at the UFC, it's pretty safe. So I still think that's the best way.
Yeah, and you can see the kind of evolution with that. You're not seeing as many scary weight cuts as
Hmm.
of late. Obviously, you still have one or two you see on the big stages each year that you're kind of bound to have that happen, but it's not the way it used to be. And it's nice because, as you said, the sport's so young still.
Yeah.
Like, realistically, it's 30, 40 years old, realistically. Like, that's the extent of it. So it's still very much growing. There's a lot more development to come. Do you see any kind of significant changes happening in the past few years that you think will create nutrition even better in the future?
Um, I think it's twofold really, because I'm still surprised when I go to these events because I go to a lot of events and I still see some of the top guys still doing some crazy stuff. Um, and it's getting better because it used to be quite difficult for maybe a lot of the Eastern European and South American people to kind of get support because they're not as much wealthy countries and all that kind of thing. So they were just doing it some crazy ways. But even those places are getting educated now, and it probably won't be this generation of fighters, but maybe the next generation of fighters. The standard of weight cutting is significantly different. It's changing a lot. In terms of advances, it's hard to say because it depends where you're going and who you're speaking to, really. You'll know online there's with anything that gets attention, a lot of people want to have a lot of says, and it's kind of filtering through who's giving you the right information and who isn't. Because I'm still seeing people at the top end advise really poorly on things as well. Um, and hopefully within the next year or so, especially in the UK anyway, me and a few other practitioners hopefully going to have a little group of people that will be seen as the regulated body of people to go to in combat sports, where it can be trusted with kind of evidence base, and we can help bring up other practitioners as well. So things are getting better. Things are much, much better. I think the casual fan will always still see it as an extreme and not really understand. But I think from my perspective on the inside of it, I'm looking at it going, still not great, but it's much better than it was.
Well, you've seen a lot of fighters come out and say, like, if they were to fight at their natural weight class, the their opponents would be so much different. Like,
Yeah. Like some people don't understand how, like, it's a strange one because I like, for me, I ain't the tallest bloke, right? And you'll know MMA, Muay Thai, you do get a size advantage based on height and everything else. But I mean, I used to fight at 61 kilos, but I'm walking around at 73. If I go into a fight at 73, I'm going up against somebody like Paddy Pimblett. Like, he's a huge bloke. Do you know what I mean? It's just not even comparable. So all of a sudden, it becomes incredibly dangerous for me not to cut weight. Like trading off a little bit of dehydration, a little bit of dieting to not get concussion. It's a fine balance there. Do you know what I mean? And don't get me wrong, if everybody walked around and agreed to fight at the weight they walk around at, we wouldn't have a problem. But all it takes is one person to cut weight, and all of a sudden we're going, this is a mismatch. Who's allowed this to happen? So it's always going to be here. It's always going to be a problem. I say it's a problem. If you do weight cutting under professional supervision, you do it with the right kind of guidance, you do it over a long enough period of time that it isn't crazy, it can be incredibly safe. It is, as long as you do it properly. The extremes that we see, or the things that do go wrong, are generally brought about by things done really poorly or advised really badly.
and have you had clients that it's been difficult to have to make weight because of poor advice in the past and maybe not listening in too well, or
I
what
think,
tends to go wrong?
yeah, it depends because you got to think it's not just, sometimes it's not just my input. I can only give so much, but if a fighter, like sometimes I have fighters come to me and go, I've already agreed to this fight. I'm doing this regardless. I'd need some help. I'm kind of like, well, I can't really say no to it unless for me it doesn't make sense to do it safely. Do you know what I mean? So I have a lot of, it's hard because I have a lot of people who are, you would call relatively big for the weight division. But when you look at the underlying data and we look at our DEXA scans and we look at the blood work and we look at everything, we go, listen, this is gonna suck regardless, right? It's gonna not be great. But you can do it safely. And I know we can get you there safely. And I know we can rehydrate you safely as long as we have the time. So yeah, I mean, I've got people who I'm not going to name names, but who are making like 70 kilos, so what, 155, walking 85 kilo plus. And I'm like, on paper, that looks crazy. But when we kind of factor in everything from muscle mass to amount of water they've got to all of these things, it looks mental. But we as a team have gone, we've done this before, we know it's safe. There's no underlying health markers that are an issue. We've got enough body fat to do it. It ain't going to be fun ever, but sometimes at the top level, the trade-off's worth it. The trade-off doesn't become worth it, and this is probably something to take note of, is like you might look at somebody in the UFC. Let's take Alex Pereira, for example. Do you remember when he used to go down? What was he making? 170, was it? Was that his lowest did he go to?
185, yeah,
180,
middleweight.
185. And I'm like, oh my God, like that was crazy. Like I can't even fathom how he does that. Like, but for him, the reward was worth the trade-off. Now, if you're an amateur MMA fighter going, well, Pereira can do it, so I can do it, you might be fighting on an amateur show and having to pay to fight, or you have your first pro fight and you're getting 100 quid. Why are we cutting so much weight? Do you know what I mean? Like at the amateur level, especially, it should be about activity and safety and getting you to the pro scene as safely and effectively as possible. You want to be performing all the way through. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes people, I don't see it as much now, but there used to be a glorification of weight cutting. I've cut X amount of weight to get here, and it was like a badge of honor to lose so much weight. And I'm like, 2, 3 fights in, you aren't going to be doing this anymore. So why are we still cutting a crazy amount of weight? Like the juice has to be worth the squeeze. And for most people, it just isn't until there's financial reward on the line, and only then really are you looking at, okay, well, maybe I should be looking at what weight category I'm involved in.
Well, you work with some of the top fighters in the world, like the likes of Tom Aspinall, Jack Carterall. Um, who was your first kind of big name that you kind of partnered with, and how did these kind of opportunities come about?
Ooh, honestly, when you get into fighting, you realize that it's not an enormously big scene. So once you know one person, you know another person, and once you're in one gym, you know everybody in that gym. So my philosophy has always been, I'm never going to reach out to people. I'm never going to ask people to work with me. If you want to work with me, I want you to work with me because you like who I am and you like what I do. So I've always said, like, I'll do the best job I can do possible and hope that it just attracts people to what I do. Um, and the thing is, working with Tom was a bit of a bizarre one because um, obviously I got into sports nutrition with no interest in getting into combat sports originally. There wasn't even the goal. And at the same time I got into combat sports nutrition, Tom was thinking about maybe not doing this anymore. Like, it's quite well documented. He couldn't get fights. He'd gone to boxing. So we were really close till we were teenagers, and then we separated and bizarrely came back together in whatever this was. And at the time I was working with like a few Muay Thai fighters, a few amateur MMA guys. He'd literally just got into the UFC off the back of Cage Warriors, and said, can you help me just look like an athlete? So I was like, yeah, I guess so. Like, we had no idea where things were going to go. Do you know what I mean? So Tom obviously was probably the biggest name. Um, but again, it's not really been a case of people going, oh, I want to work with you because you work with Tom. Because fighting, the amount of heavyweights, there's not many. Do you know what I mean? So it's very, very hard to attract heavyweights because most of them are kind of all right. I mean, I've got quite a few, which is great. People are seeing off the back of Tom's work on his conditioning and his body and his athleticism that maybe that is the new standard of heavyweight, which is great. Do you know what I mean? We're redefining that, and I have a few more heavyweights now working with me to achieve that, which is great. But honestly, it's just filtered through good work. I've done years and years and years of, like, I don't want to call it grassroots because I don't want to disrespect anybody, but like from people wearing shin pads all the way up to kind of where we are now. And I'll still work with those people. I always say to people, like, as long as you're willing to put in the work, as long as the dedication's there, as long as we get on, I'll work with absolutely anybody. I want everybody to be the best fighter and the safest weight cuts they can do. So, yeah, I'd probably say maybe Tom from an MMA side of things, and that's going really well. I'd probably say at the moment, by the end of the year, I'm hoping we've probably got 7 UFC athletes on the roster, which is, for me, is mad. Do you know what I mean? Just to be involved in UFC anything. I was like, Jesus, we might have 7 guys in the UFC at this point. So, yeah, always grateful. Like I said, you do the work, you keep doing good work, being good people, and turning up, and doors open.
100%, mate. And if you had one last piece of advice for any fighters out there, what would it be?
Food wise,
Anything wise,
ooh,
whatever you think is missing the most in MMA that you don't hear.
um, I think let's do two. I think food wise, I think give yourself more time than you need to. I think for camps, the hardest camps I ever see are people crashing weight in 4 or 5 weeks' time. And uh, I've seen very, very talented fighters stop doing the sport that they love because they hated weight cutting. And that makes me a bit sad because I'm like, if if you give me 10 to 12 weeks, or you give somebody 10 to 12 weeks to give you all the foods that you want to eat, to give you an energy intake that means you really enjoy going to the gym and training, and life doesn't suck, I can change your perspective on weight cutting. And don't get me wrong, when you're really lean, it's not going to be great. The last 2 weeks might not be fun. But if you can enjoy camp and you can still enjoy your sport when you're cutting weight, you will be in this sport for as long as you want to be. If you spend 8 weeks avoiding a diet to crash diet in 4, every camp you're gonna hate. And all of a sudden, you're gonna fall out of love with the sport, no matter how talented you are. I've seen it time and time again. So give yourself more time, I think, if you are going to try and make a weight category. And I think you know what? It's a weird one with combat sports because I see a lot of talented fighters now not get opportunities. And I'm harping onto a lot of my guys. And listen, I ain't the biggest fan of social media. If I didn't do this job, I wouldn't be on social media, right? But unfortunately, it's part of the fight game now. And there's a lot of Instagram fighters as well. You'll know this. You see a lot of guys who just go and hit the bag, and it's a case of working in silence and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, if you are somebody who wants to eventually shoot for the UFC, shoot for one championship, I've been in rooms where they're selecting fighters, unfortunately based on popularity. Who are they? Who can do the best story? Who's going to sell this fight the best? And unfortunately, it's a business, and that's the way it's going. So I'm not saying you have to be an Instagram fighter, but my advice to the younger guys and even a lot of the guys at the top level now is do something on social media. Build a fan base, build a personal brand, because I don't want you to look back on your career in 5, 10, 15 years and wonder why you didn't get the opportunities. There's opportunities to earn money outside of fighting. I mean, look at Tom. Like, from when he was injured, his profile just doubled and tripled from even when he was not fighting. Do you know what I mean? And I still want this for everybody else. And it doesn't mean you have to be spamming socials, but it means you have to do something. You want the opportunities. You want to be that guy. Learn something to do with socials. Just to be out there. Eventually it will pay off. Like, it'll feel cringe to start. I promise it will. But long term, the opportunities will come from doing something.
Yeah, that's perfect, mate, and I 100% agree. I think, or especially now that so many people are involved in the sport and it's growing so much, you need to set yourself apart. So I think that's the best advice that
You've
there
got to
is
do
out
something,
there.
right? You can be one of the best fighters ever, but sometimes, like we see it a lot in the UFC, the fights that should be made aren't made because the more popular guy gets the fight. And I'm on to my guys at the moment just to do it. Just do it. Just see what happens. Worst case scenario, nobody cares. But best case scenario, the opportunities come. Look at Paddy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, Paddy's nailed it, but the opportunities have come, and now everybody's gone, oh, you know what? He's actually a really good fighter as well. And it's taken this long for people to realize how good of a fighter he is, because people thought he was a bit of a showman, but he's laughing all the way there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And he's got a nice payday the whole way there too.
Oh yeah, oh mate,
That's the main
100%.
thing.
That's it. But he's had sponsorships all the way from when he started. Do you know what I mean? So it's a
Yeah.
case of you put yourself out there and people make your life easier to then go and be a better fighter. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you are somebody who's got the time to invest in learning to do that, 100%, you have to do it. Have to do it.
Yeah, 100% agree with you, mate. And thank you so much for coming on. So insightful, and really appreciate your time. If you have any socials, anything you want to drop, let us know.
I'm most active on Instagram, really. If you want to find me on Instagram, it's at Dr Sean Aspinall. If you want a little bit more less professional, but still professional, TikTok is at usually red. It is, so find me on both of those.
Thank you so much for your time, mate.
It's all right, mate. Thank you for having me on. It's been good.
Hey. Ambitions is a rider. Hey.